Hi, I am Edwin, and you don't normally hear from me in my hiking videos. Instead, I like to transport you with the views and the experience we have while we're hiking. But this video is going to be a little bit different. You see, for the Drakensberg Mini Traverse, also known as the Northern Drakensberg Traverse, I feel it's important to talk through the hike and the experiences I personally had on it. I have never downplayed the Drakensberg Mountains. Growing up, my family spent holidays camping in the foothills of the Drakensberg, going on day hikes and swimming in the rivers. But I also remember the sometimes scary changes in the weather, and even seeing a family friend getting hypothermia and the frantic race to stabilize her. Hiking in the Drakensberg Mountains has always been a thrilling yet rewarding experience. And despite this being the 5th time in the berg this year, I always remind myself of the dangers that can arise during the journey. Many people have died in the Drakensberg. This was no different for the Northern Traverse, a challenging hike through the rugged landscapes of the Drakensberg Mountains, usually taking 5 days, or over 75 kilometers of the Northern Berg, starting from the Sentinel car park and ending at Cathedral Peak Hotel, and requiring a high level of fitness, preparation, and hiking experience. I would not recommend that you do this hike if you have not done any multi-day hikes in the Drakensberg, unless going with a guide. After hiking from the Sentinel Peak car park for a couple of kilometers, you're greeted with 2 chain ladders, the first being 40 meters long and the second half of that. With a 25 kg pack on your back, this was a thrilling yet rewarding experience, but far easier than taking the gully. This area was swarming with day hikers, going up onto the amphitheater to see the highest waterfall in the world. My recommendation is to enjoy the people around you during this time, because for the next few days you'll be lucky if you see or hear from anyone. Most hikers doing the DNT camp at the top of the Tugela Falls. However, we elected to continue on hiking through to the Fidi Pass and finding a somewhat known cave in the area where we took refuge. The cave we slept in transported us into what felt like a movie. As the sun set, we were greeted by the sound of baboons and a falling rock from above. As it got darker and the first few stars came out, we peered over into a lightning storm in the foothills of South Africa, watching with amazement from above. Eyes then popped up, staring at us from the grass. We grabbed our headlamps to find a hare attempting to seek shelter. The night wasn't over. As we peered across the star-swept night, the sky filled with fireflies dancing around us as we drifted off to sleep, ending a 17-kilometer hike on day 1. The next morning, we were up at 4:30 to watch the sunrise and get ready for the day. We knew we had a long day ahead of us, with our next stop being Fangs Pass and the hope of finding a hidden cave to seek refuge for the night. We were expecting lightning and rain in the evening and felt like it was important for us to make sure we were safe as early as possible. We were greeted by baboons as we left the cave, making our way off the escarpment ledge where we had slept. This day continued to offer us incredible views, including Madonna and her worshippers, but also felt a little harder than the day before, reminding me that this hike was still for the experience despite it being on top of the Drakensberg. As soon as we reached the top of a hill or a mountain, we'd be greeted with another. With no paths on the Drakensberg Traverse, you navigate alone over rocks, through grasslands and across streams and waterbeds, being careful not to slip on the moss-covered rocks. Despite the slow and steady climbs, you still feel alive and free, and the stunning views of the surrounding landscapes were an added bonus that happily kept us going. We finally reached Fangs Pass, the pass we hoped to find our cave for the night. However, we struggled to find the entry point into Fangs, where the cave was meant to be. We then stashed our bags and headed down Fangs to try to find our sleeping space. But after about an hour and a bit of searching and debating, we finally decided that we would have to neglect the dream of a cave for the night and instead continued to hike until we found a place that we felt safe from the lining to pitch our tents. This was the first time I felt isolated on this hike. There was no way to let my family know that we had to abort our planned route, and the thought of being exposed to the Drakensberg lightning overnight. Lightning and some in the Drakensberg is a massive danger to hikers, and the Drakensberg alone experiences 20 lightning strikes per square kilometer per year, most of which happen in the summer months. Lightning can strike at any time, and it can be difficult to predict when a storm will occur. Being too close to a river is dangerous, but so is being on top of a mountain. We found a good in-between, not too far from water, but also surrounded by multiple hills, and ending our day with just under 17 kilometers of hiking completed, with an elevation gain of 584 meters. We set up camp, had dinner, and headed off to bed at around 7 p.m. During the night we experienced a little bit of thunder in the distance, moderate winds and a bit of rain, but our tents held up strong, and we were over the moon that we didn't have to get into the lining position overnight. At 4 a.m. we woke up hoping to get an early start. We had checked the weather before we left, and we were expecting to get hit with a lightning storm at around 12. As we headed down into the Fangs River Valley, we spotted two people at the river about 800 meters behind us. Being in the berg is lonely, and you can feel completely isolated. If anything goes wrong, you are on your own, and with no one around, you feel it. Seeing these two humans gave me a sense of safety. Our aim for the day was to follow the Moeni cutbacks, crossing into the Moeni area and getting to a cave just above Rockery's Pass by 11 a.m. before the lightning storm rolled in. We went quickly, making up incredible time, but finally being passed by the two guys we had seen earlier. They mentioned that they were trail running the Grand Traverse and hoping to complete it within 6 days. As they took off, we continued to see them for the next 5 to 6 kilometers, and by the time we got to the Moeni area at around 9:30ish, we decided to instead continue to hike and complete both day 3 and day 4 in one. Because of this, instead of going through Moeni, we elected to stay more into Lesotho, following the brooks and finally hitting the Senku River, which later becomes the well-known Orange River. The Senku was beautiful and had incredible swimming opportunities, but with the weather being overcast and us knowing that we had a lot of distance to cover, we only dipped in once briefly to clean off and refresh. At around the 18-kilometer mark, we started feeling the day hit us. We still had an estimated 2 hours of hiking to go, but we missed the Nonchalana saddle we were meant to go over, and instead added an additional 2 kilometers of hiking to our day, finally making it back onto the Nonchalana ridge and down the mountainside towards the well-known pass, often used for smuggling between South Africa and Lesotho. We then headed to the cave we had stayed in a few months before, in the Easter Pass area. When reaching the cave at around 3:30 p.m., after hiking 25 kilometers and an elevation gain of 810 meters, the entire cave was wet due to the considerable amounts of rain over the December month, so we laid down our tent ground sheets and set up our sleeping gear for the night. I became extremely cold at this point, so got changed into my sleeping gear and crept into my sleeping bag. An extremely freezing wind had picked up and was blowing into the cave, at which point we decided that we should rather pitch our tents in the cave, which we ended up doing just in case the wind didn't die down. I then forced down some dinner, knowing that I hadn't eaten enough in the day. For some reason, when I go into the Drakensberg, my appetite is suppressed, possibly because of the altitude at over 3,000 meters. The next morning, we woke up in our tents at around 3:45. We wanted to set out as early as possible, knowing that our entire day was going to be a wet one. We packed up our gear and headed down Easter and along the Kwatsi riverbed. The wet fog had set in overnight, and we knew we were in for a wet day ahead. We found our way onto the Mabonja Pass and started making our way down the pass slowly. This part of the hike was extremely wet, making our descent even slower than expected. From the top of the pass, you descend 1 kilometer in just 3 kilometers, showing how extreme the drop was. Unfortunately, the rain came in, making it hard for us to get footage of the pass. But this pass was undoubtedly the hardest part of our hike. We lost our way multiple times, and because of the cold and wet weather, if we stopped to reorientate, we would get cold very quickly, forcing us to continue to move, which in hindsight just made things more frantic. Before getting lost, we had met a couple going down the pass, and had lost them during the descent, but we met up with them again, and we decided to try stick together as much as we could. With the vast amounts of water on the mountain and the multiple river crossings, the descent became increasingly dangerous, and a lot of bushwhacking was needed that we had to do to descend further down the riverbed to try and find safer points to cross. Luckily, we were now a 4-man team, and crossing the rivers became a group effort that would have been a nightmare with just 2 of us. Finally, after 22 kilometers of hiking and an elevation gain of 714 meters, we made it to the Cathedral Peak Hotel and nabbed the last room available for the night. The Northern Traverse is no easy feat and should definitely not be called the Drakensberg Mini Traverse. You should be an experienced and prepared hiker to do this unforgettable trek. The Northern Traverse is a true test of endurance and determination, but the sense of accomplishment you'll feel upon reaching the end will make it worth it. When we finally reached the end of the trail, we collapsed in exhaustion, but also in joy and thankfulness that we were safe. Unfortunately, there have been far too many deaths in the Berg while attempting to explore these stunning but dangerous mountains. The rough ground and sheer cliffs of the Drakensberg Mountains make it simple to lose balance and fall. Always be vigilant and aware of your surroundings, especially when negotiating challenging terrain. There is no one to help you immediately in the Berg. When hiking in the Drakensberg Mountains, it is crucial to be prepared. Follow the right safety precautions, carry a map, compass, and let everyone know what your plans are. We had completed the Drakensberg Northern Traverse and had created memories and received an education that will last us our lifetime.